So we're starting season 4 of Mighty Merp. I definitely vacillate between wanting to look extremely professional while I'm in court to wanting to be extremely comfortable while I'm in court. And these two ideas do conflict with each other on a daily basis, if you can imagine.
I'm sure. I've been to court a few times and I wanted to look good.
Join us at mightymerp.com. Host Melissa Rosenblum is one of only a few women certified by the Supreme Court of New Jersey as a criminal trial attorney. When you add kids, a booming law business, and a little black book full of subject matter experts, you've got the Mighty Merp podcast. This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
People are going to start thinking I've represented you. I have never represented my producer in court.
Our relationship is young, counselor. Our relationship is young.
Go.
Plus, don't I have to slip you $5 across the table before we even have attorney-client privilege, or was that just from Better Call Saul?
Well, I think consultations really, even though there's no money exchange, there's still a sense of privacy.
Oh, that's really interesting. But the way you just described it as a complete gray area, the language you just used.
So if somebody's calling for a consultation and they're providing me information so I can determine the difficulty of the case and sort of my fees and how it's going to proceed, I say there's attorney-client privilege. I think that the relationship has begun, and I think that whatever they say to their attorney in that consultation is protected, which is why, so with that being said, if they don't retain me, it can still create conflicts if co-defendants want to reach out to me, right? So if I meet with a client and they say, it's not me, but it's Thomas Ritter who's guilty. That's why in family, for attorneys that handle divorce, I've heard that people sometimes will make appointments with 5 local divorce attorneys and do the initial consultation, and then those attorneys are conflicted out of the case. So I would say even for the consultation, it creates an attorney-client privilege.
That's probably just cleaner, too, to do it that way. A cleaner line in the sand for everybody involved, even if it does become inconvenient because somebody's running around town speaking with every freaking lawyer in the phone book.
Yeah, all's fair in love and war, right? Don't they say that?
Yeah, no lies.
Yeah. So we're starting season 4 of Mighty Merp.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back in the saddle. What's your feeling and what's your projection for where we want to go and what we want to do?
Well, I'm excited about the guests and ideas that we have lined up. We've already taped one, which is continuing the theme of mental health and lawyer wellness. And I think that's always going to be conversations that we have, especially because I love talking to attorneys. And I think that the reality is we have really tough jobs. We're dealing with other people's problems. And so I think lawyer wellness and well-being will always be there. But I also think we're going to focus a lot on individual type cases, complex cases, sort of talking to experts in different areas. I have an expert on domestic violence, intimate partner violence, who has testified as an expert in New Jersey numerous times. We're going to focus on what people considered battered women syndrome and battered women defense and sort of how that plays out in the courts. I have another expert who's involved and has handled cases where nurses and medical professionals have been charged criminally. Have a podcast coming up where we're going to talk with Rich Lamora, and I are going to have a great conversation about resolving cases, whether it's in civil or criminal court, kind of the factors that weigh in on why cases don't go to trial, why cases do go to trial. I think that what's always printed in the newspaper about cases is not really, it's such a small sliver of the reality of what's going on. And it's sort of a behind the scenes look with lawyers of how we resolve and why we resolve cases. And I think it'll give some insight to kind of the general public who are interested in law, criminal matters. You know, there seems to be a high volume of people that are really interested in criminal cases and kind of their input about why they're either, in every case, I'm going to say it like this. I know you know what I'm talking about. In every case, if you look at a news story and then a sentence is written about what the individual was sentenced as, and usually those clips from that are reported in papers are coming from a prosecutor's office or the attorney general's office. It's their news release. But if you look at the comments, there will be as many people saying that person should have been sentenced to a greater sentence, and just as many people saying that sentence is too high and that person shouldn't have been sentenced that way. So we're going to kind of delve into sort of the nuances of that.
My God. I will say this. Nobody has any business saying anything. I way over comment. I way over speak, and I guarantee I spend no less than 10 hours a week outside of recording, outside of my clients, reading case law, listening to lawyers. I do more homework than anybody I know who isn't a lawyer, and I've got no freaking business opening my mouth.
Right.
It's like my learning about the Kennedy assassination for me. I used to think I knew stuff about it. Now I've read 30 books in 2.5 years, and now I think I know this much. It's the same thing with legal. And and I'm mostly looking at criminal. Mostly. I really like some intellectual property stuff too. Some of that's really fascinating. But to your point, it's what people get interested in tends to be criminal. But to them, it's just the same. It's true crime. True crime is the number one media intake other than music, maybe. And it's podcasts, it's movies, it's YouTube, but true crime. So they're not drawing a line between these true crime stories and talking about that and a real legal conversation. And those are two different ball games.
They're two different. And when people look at, so what I always say is that when I read an article and there's a resolution to the case, I'm always, whatever the sentence is, there is, so many different factors, strength of the case, and also the jurisdiction. Each jurisdiction, New Jersey has a lot of mandatory penalties on certain offenses that people don't understand. And so, they might think a plea is a high sentence on a case, and it's usually lower than the mandatory. There's nuances on that. And so I'm going to talk to Rich about those nuances, and we're also going to talk about the civil side as well, because I don't handle civil cases at all. And it is interesting, people call me, I don't know if you have this, and they ask me about whether they have a civil case or not. And my response is, I have no idea, and I always say, it sounds like you might have something, but I have to refer out. And then what civil cases really go to trial? And it's the same idea of me not understanding those nuances. But, I think, I've had some high profile cases, and they've resolved in the last year. And I think hearing it from the personal standpoint, I think will be intriguing and interesting to people, a sort of the behind the scenes conversation. But I am going to segue into something else you said. You said you're interested in intellectual property.
Yeah, I find it pretty fascinating.
So my segue into that is the exciting news that Mighty Merp logo has been trademarked. We're trademarked. And
that's awesome.
We're growing. We're like the little engine that could. We think we can. So, so I'm really excited about that episode. I have one or two people lined up for some crazy courtroom stories, maybe some stories of lawyers fighting in the courtroom. It's always fun when the lawyers start behaving badly, right?
It's fun for me.
So, and then, I know you mentioned that we haven't recorded in a while. It was usually at the end of my seasons. I think I've always done either a recap or sort of a year in review or just even a nice conversation with Meg as our season finale, right? Has that been the case?
Yeah, you did that last time too, that was like February or yeah, you wrapped up after the new year this time, I think.
Yeah, I think it was a little abrupt. I had a few people. I think we kind of recorded into February and we didn't have that final episode. And talking about lawyer well-being, I personally had lost my mom in March unexpectedly, who I'd been caring for. I think she had dementia, but she should not have passed away. She ended up having an infection that unfortunately caused her to pass. And I, after that, just didn't do anything with the podcast and was kind of on triage mode with everything. So took the summer to recoup. And that is why we are ready to return.
Yeah, we're back with
new season.
A trademark and a vengeance.
A trademark and a vengeance. There you go. So
that'd be a good title for an intellectual property podcast. I'll write that down.
There you go. Maybe I'll see if I can find someone who can educate us. But funny story with the Mighty Merp podcast trademark. I have one of the twins, one of my boys is at Rochester Institute of Technology. He's a computer science major, gaming app, some computer fancy title. He helps me with my logo and my Photoshop stuff a lot because there's lots I can do. I can't do that. And so I sent him the Mighty Merp logo, and I also sent him, I have it connected to my law office logo as well, and said, hey, Daniel, can you, when you have time, put the trademark, the R circle after Merp on the Mighty Merp podcast, because it's been trademarked. And he said, yeah, sure. And then an hour later, he said, I'll do it later. And then he texted me and he said, are you federally registered as a trademark? Which I thought was so funny that my kid was like checking to make sure that I legally had the trademark done correctly before he was willing to actually put the trademark logo signature on my logo. And I had to send it to him, which I'm going to, let's see if it's like right here that I can show you. Hold on. I had taken a picture of it to say, yes, I am officially, according to the United States of America, there's the seal, trademark.
That is funny.
Yes, that my son wanted to check with me to make sure that I did it legally correct before he did it. So, yeah.
And we're recording on Friday again, right? We've got something?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yes, we are going to be talking about the case I handled where I had a nurse accused of manslaughter for accidentally hanging the wrong IV bag.
Ooh.
You're talking to the expert that was used in that case.
Well, that's ugly story, but I mean, that's like people make mistakes. Like, that's just a terrible thing to hear because you have to imagine no nurse ever wants to hang the wrong IV bag. I just kind of cringe because I'm thinking, good Lord, I've made mistakes way sillier than that in my life. Way sillier. With way less repercussions. Right.
And it is interesting if you do the research. I've listened to other podcasts on this when other nurses similarly situated in other states were accused, and sort of it's never a one-person problem. it is a systems failure on so many levels. And that's what happened in this case. And it's usually, in the end, it's easy to blame the last person who touched the item in question, but it is usually a systems error of multiple failures that occur prior to the last act occurring.
Even when you watch those stories on TV, when it's medical, it's funny, when you mention that, the first thing that popped into my head was somebody's got bad handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first, and I don't know if that has anything to do with your case, but the first thing, you're like, she hung the wrong IV bag. I'm like, somebody's got bad handwriting.
Right.
And
right.
I'm probably wrong in this instance, but I feel like I've heard so many stories about accidental death in hospitals that
right.
multiple times it went back to somebody's handwriting that wasn't the last person in the chain.
Right. And then who do you charge? Is it the last person? Is it the hospital? Is it the facility? Is it the fact that, in this case, there was a nurse who put an IV bag in a main refrigerator that should have been in a locked refrigerator. Was that person charged? No. And then New Jersey's different, again, from other states, because other states have negligent homicide and New Jersey doesn't. So it's a higher legal standard. It's a reckless is the lowest standard, so that reckless is, a conscious disregard. And the best example I always give is a vehicular homicide when someone consumed alcohol, because we all know what happens when you consume alcohol and get behind the wheel of a car. So it's a conscious disregard of a substantial risk,
Yeah, the difference being you didn't know there was a bag that didn't belong in that fridge to begin with.
Right, because you didn't put it there. Somebody else put it there.
Yeah, your failure to recognize it may be a failure, but it's not like a willful disregard category of failure.
Right. And it's interesting because where the medical staff and the nursing organizations fall on this is obviously to protect their staff and also to ensure that there's not a chilling effect in reporting. So I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but there's a case in Tennessee where a nurse was prosecuted for administering the wrong medicine, and she was prosecuted under a negligent homicide statute. And when the woman died, who was an elder woman, and they didn't know the cause of death, it could have been initially just cardiac arrest while she was waiting to get an MRI. And the nurse actually self-reported it. She said, "Oh my goodness, I think I might have, now that I'm thinking about it, I might have given the wrong medicine was dispensed, and I gave her that medicine instead of the medicine that was prescribed." And so she self-reported, so there could have been an inquiry in the hospital to see where the mistake is, which is what normally happens, so the mistake doesn't occur again. And based on her being honest about what occurred and alerting the staff that it might have been a medicine accident, then she was prosecuted for it. And again, that's a case in Tennessee that I think the woman was convicted in 2022.
Ooh, convicted.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it comes down to details. I'm not judging. Could be a perfectly fine conviction based on the facts.
No, I think it's a really, again, I don't know all the facts, but when I listen to all the other mistakes and errors that occurred, and you're thinking, why was the hospital not prosecuted? Why wasn't the supervisor not prosecuted? Why wasn't, it's really that last person. That's really,
Yeah, that's what I get. Well, I didn't think in this instance was they're coming out and self-reporting, probably feeling like, oh, well, I'm just a part of this process and something went wrong. We should talk about it. Versus I'm the very last person, so they're 100% going to blame me. Like that probably isn't the mindset. It's like, oh, I'm part of this chain of command and this chain of process, and it went wrong. Versus, oh no, I'm the last one to touch the ball, so they're going to put it all on me no matter what.
And we're talking about situations where it's a true accident. It's a true mistake that occurred. You know, we're all on the same page that if there's like a crazy psychotic medical person, doctor, nurse, or so forth, that's hurting patients, they're going to, you know, nobody has a problem about prosecuting that and about those individuals being convicted. We're not talking about those cases. We're really going to have the conversation of an accident, a mistake, you know, which occurs and, you know, which will, you know, as much as we try in each field to make sure that those mistakes don't occur, you know, in medical fields, we don't want the mistake of wrong medicine or anyone to be injured because of a mistake. In the criminal world, we don't want anyone convicted that really is not guilty. We don't want anyone sentenced who is innocent, right? I mean, we want those mistakes removed. But at the same time, we don't really prosecute people for those mistakes, usually.
Yeah, what's funny is if you then dig into the other side of the coin a little bit and you look up the nefarious actors who are nurses, like the serial killer nurses, what you find inevitably is that it was the hospital who didn't want to report, because those types of people, the people around them, start reporting like bananas, and hospital administration tends to sweep it under the rug, send them to the next hospital to continue their diabolical
Well, I can think of
schemes.
other organizations that have done similar of like just moving people, but I'm not an expert in that area, so I'm not gonna.
I can think of a couple different types of organizations that do just that very type thing. Yeah. One of them is, I was just reading this morning about a guy who's not allowed to be a police officer in state X, but it doesn't say he can't be a sheriff.
So I would say to you, New Jersey has closed that loophole, because if, at least in a criminal realm, if you have lost your ability to hold a position of public office, and it lists like all the areas, you can't have a job in public office, you know?
Yeah, this wasn't Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. So all very interesting. But I'm looking forward to a great season 4. And, you know, as always, still looking for those crazy courtroom stories. Now, I posted on LinkedIn, but you should share my post about the crazy courtroom stories on LinkedIn.
Which post about crazy courtroom stories?
I posted recently, like a week or 2 ago, about looking for crazy courtroom stories still.
I'll repost that. Yeah, 100%. I'll find that and repost it.
Okay. It was maybe 2 weeks ago.
Oh, you don't post like a maniac. I can find it.
I don't. I go in ebbs and flows. You know what? I think I'm going to try to start recording or posting something every day. And I might start trying to record and post TikToks every day. Like 1 to 2 minute, like, what do you do if you get stopped by the police driving? How do you answer their questions? What do you not say to the police? I can't tell you how many people just admit what they did wrong. Don't admit what you did wrong.
Oh, that makes me so angry.
When the officer says, do you know why I pulled you over? Don't say, yes, I ran that light. The answer is, no, officer, I have no idea why you pulled me over. Actually, the answer is no, and then zip it. But, you know, I'm going to say it like this. The police have a lot of power, and you can be respectful and you can be polite without giving up your constitutional rights. They're not the same exact thing. They have a job to do, and I get that. And in the scheme of things, sometimes a speeding ticket isn't a big deal. But, you know, even basic, where my client says I was doing 79 and they wrote me a ticket for 93, it's a big difference in a ticket, you know?
I'll fight that, sure.
I mean, but I have a client who was like, are you sure you clocked me? I was doing 79. And I'm like, well, you just admitted you were doing 79. You know what I mean? Like, and they think they're helping themselves, you know? And I don't necessarily think it's helping, you know?
Well, to your point, in bringing up constitutional rights, I do. It's funny, if you've got me dead to rights, for something, it's like I have no problem admitting to what I've done wrong. But to your point, only if I've done something wrong. Like otherwise, I'm not going to produce ID. I'm not going to answer your questions. Like if somebody's fishing.
You have to in a car, give them your license, your ID, your insurance. Okay. You have to do that in the car.
Fair. Okay. Say it's a DUI stop in Florida. I'm not even going to roll my window down, Merp. I'm going to hang my shit out the window in a plastic bag with a note pointing to the statute that says they have no effing right to anything because there's no probable cause. There's nada. These unconstitutional.
They don't need probable cause to stop you. They need reasonable suspicion. You mean DUI?
Either or.
Stops,
I'm talking about checkpoints. I'm talking about unconstitutional checkpoints of any kind.
I don't think the courts have ruled those checkpoints are unconstitutional, Tom.
Oh, no, they haven't. No, of course they haven't.
So you can't take the position, I'm just saying, you can't take the position that you know the law more than the courts or the police. Because I would say to you, it's not the fight to have it on the street. I would say if you want to challenge the constitutionality of a DUI checkpoint, which I think you're going to lose anyway, but if you want to fight it and you want to pay an attorney to fight it, then I want you to be the choir boy of stops and compliance and cooperation.
Sure.
I want you to be the ideal defendant and not the, defendant who gave the police such a hard time that nobody wants to rule in your favor because, for 100%. Lack of a better way of saying it, you were just an asshole. And I have clients that when they come in and they have 10 tickets and not the usual 2 to 4 tickets, I gently say to them, so you gave the police a hard time, and if I have a good rapport with them, I might be like, this is called an asshole tax. You were an asshole, so they kept adding tickets to your case. So my point is that as much as you're like, I'm not going to comply and cooperate, I would say to you, no, I want you to comply and cooperate and hand your license, registration, insurance. I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to hand it over. I want you to do what you have to do for us to fight it in court. It's like, I'm going to give a different example than DUI. Okay. When my kids got their driver's license, and I say this to all young people, especially kids that, they have kids coming in and out of their car, backpacks in and out. You know what I'm saying? Like they're carpooling. And so I said to them, at the time, my marijuana was still illegal in New Jersey. And I said, if the police stop you for any reason, you are polite. You don't say anything other than, here's my license, insurance, and registration. If they say, do you know why we pulled you over? The answer is no. And if they ever ask to search your car for any reason that they can give you or no reason at all, the answer is no. And it's not a no, you don't have probable cause. No, you don't have a reason to search my car. No, you can't because I said so. It is just no. And their follow-up question is always, well, what happens when the police say why? And I said, your answer is, I don't know why, but my mom told me the answer is no.
Perfect.
That is it. And then they are going to say to you, we will tow your car. And you say, if that's what you have to do. If they say, we're going to get a warrant, if that's what you have to do. And they'll say, well, if you just let us search your car, you won't have to get a warrant. You won't have to have the car towed. And the answer is, no, I will not consent. And again, you keep putting it back on me. Don't say I'm a lawyer. Don't say I'm a criminal defense. Don't say anything other than, no, my mom told me to say no. I don't know why. And that is it. And the answer for that is, you have people coming into your car. You don't know what they left in your car. I know you. none of you are cleaning this car out. You guys are all slobs. You don't know what's under the seats of the car. And God forbid someone left drugs in your car or they left something else that's illegal. You will be responsible and you will have ownership to that, whether you like it or not. So if they have probable cause, they have probable cause and they'll get a warrant. If they don't have probable cause, they're not going to get a warrant. And we're fighting it in court no matter what. Either way, if something is found in your car, the only place for us to win is in a courtroom. So I would rather you be, again, the poster child of a defendant, right, who was cooperative, who was kind, respectful, but still honored your constitutional rights.
That's perfect advice. There's so many people just, no matter what, no. No matter what, as soon as you say yes, you just open the gates of hell on yourself in terms of them fishing now. I don't know, I find it offensive to not protect your constitutional rights. There's a lot of dead people in Arlington right now who gave their life for your constitutional rights. I find that when people say things like, oh, I don't care if the government does surveillance on my phone calls, I don't do anything wrong. You might as well go desecrate half the graves in Arlington if you have that opinion. You might as well take a shit on the tomb of the unknown soldier. That's how offensive it is to me that you don't care about those rights. It creates a visceral contempt within me that people say things about giving away their rights.
Right. And do you know how many clients say to me, I didn't think I had anything to hide? And that's why I talked to the police or I answered those questions. And unfortunately, when I get the reports of the conversations, I only get the parts of the conversation that hurts my clients, so that's unfortunately in the report until I listen to the important part, the part that supports the state's narrative, not the actual full story. The other thing is, the officers are supposed to tell you that you have a right to refuse on a consent search, but they don't tell you that until you're signing the paperwork. So they're saying like, we're going to tow your car. We're going to be able to search it anyway. We're going to, what they're not saying normally until you actually sign the consent is you have a right to refuse. And if they said it initially, which is what you're supposed to be telling an individual, I'm asking consent to search the car. You do have a right to refuse. That's not how it's never coming out like that. Because if you heard that from the beginning, you would say, oh, I'm going to take my right to refuse. Thank you. Right?
Yeah, it's almost like the reverse. Essentially, those are very, very low-level threats is what they are, to keep you.
They are.
Yeah, so that's.
But if you can't afford to get your car out, if it's towed, if you can't, those are the things. You have to pay for the towing. If it's in an impound lot for 2 days or 3 days, you're paying those bills. So those are real fears for some people, it might
100%.
not seem like a lot of money for some people, but for for a 19, 20-year-old kid that might, and also oh my goodness, my parents are going to kill me, sort of.
The vast majority of this country doesn't have $500 for an emergency right now.
Right. So those are real fears as well, Tom, things that people don't really think about on a daily basis, when they're most people say, if you don't have anything to hide, why wouldn't you talk to the police? And, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I can tell you about either false confessions. I can tell you, about, people being under so much pressure that they admit to things just to be able to end the interview. I can, talk to you about how even innocent things where the officers have, during an interview said, well, if this happened, blah, 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 blah. And clients say, well, if that did occur, then, and then they answer the rest of the sentence and the report says defendant admitted, and I had one, I think I've talked about the case with Meg. I had one case where the detective said to my client, who else has keys to the car? And my client said, well, I have keys to the car. And he said, and my sister, and as he says, my sister the officer says, so you're the only one with the keys to the car. And the report, the handwritten report says, defendant admitted he's the only person with keys to the car. Now, the car, we know from reading all the reports, is definitely involved in a shooting. Okay? So the narrative is my client has to be driving the car because he's the only one with the keys to the car. And it took us almost a year to get the actual recordings of the interview. And then we're like, oh, that's not what he said at all. He didn't say he was the only, that's what the report says. But the actual interview, he said, I have keys to the car and my sister, and it wasn't included in the report.
Yeah, that's just kindergarten coppery. Like, that's not. And then how much more are they spending between day 1 and day 365 for your body cam request? Like, that's what offends me, is we could have nipped this in the bud pretty quick if we simply had the facts, you know? Like,
and the interview. And then,
yeah.
But here's the thing. In the end, that client spent all that time in jail. And I say this regularly. I call Meg up and have this conversation. The video in criminal cases, the amount of videos has exploded over the years because everyone has body cam, which is good. I am happy that everyone has body cam. But each case I have has hours and hours of body cam. And I cannot tell you how many times we find things on the body cam that's inconsistent with what's in the written report. And I have an associate. I have 2 paralegals that are college-educated criminal justice degrees. And then I usually have 1 to 2 interns every semester from the local college. And they're all watching these videos. And I think to myself, how does an individual who has no support staff or limited support staff get through these videos? Because they're hours and hours. One case could have 20 hours of video between 5 cops. And most of it isn't relevant, but you got to watch it all because you don't know what is relevant and what isn't relevant.
You just gave me an idea for an app.
There you go. Make the money, Tom. Make the money.
Upload all your body cam to the app, and I'll send it out to people who like to watch body cam. I don't know what their credentials would need to be, but hell, I'd watch body cam for an hourly rate.
I mean,
that
listen,
would fascinate me. That would, if somebody sent me if there was an app and it was like, Uber, you've got the time this week for 6 hours of this. Here's the documentation. Here's a set of facts. Drive around listening to this like it was a podcast. And
I know, but here's the thing.
That's terrifying
the thing
to
is
you.
that
That's got to be
needed,
terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I don't want someone who's not in my office. Maybe I'm too much of a control freak, Tom, but I want to be able to review the discovery. I want to see what's on the body cam. Sometimes I'm able to say to them, I want you to see if the defendant invoked Miranda. I want to know how long my client was in the interview room before he was interviewed. I want to know, the DUI cases, they have all these field sobrieties on body cam. I want you to watch it. I want you to give me a play-by-play of each of the field sobriety tests and the interaction. I want you to tell me if the paperwork is consistent, fair and consistent. I just had a DUI case where one of the field sobriety tests, my client completed perfectly. And on the body cam, the officer said, you did that perfectly. Do you think that was in the paper discovery? It's not. It was not. The paper discovery had her doing the field sobriety test that she didn't complete as they determined successfully, and they left out the one that she completed perfectly. And then the end of it is I want them to say to me, in a layperson's opinion, watching it, this person appeared intoxicated based on, or this person did not appear intoxicated, because we all know what someone looks like if they're intoxicated, right? Like, you don't need an expert opinion on that. So
No, and it's probably, dispassionate eyes aren't going to have any trouble arriving at a conclusion of, oh, yeah, they look drunk, or, oh, no, they don't look drunk. There's no impetus to feed you any crap in that conversation. And
right.
yeah, I see the value in that. And I do recognize the preposterous nature of what I was proposing.
Yeah. No, but I will tell you that the reason why I have college students, undergrad students do this is that one of my kids was working for me during the summer, and he's an excellent writer. He's like a very common sense kid, and he likes watching TV. I was like, Jar, watch the body cam, like every day, and
that's what I'm saying.
He was great.
I think that would be a really interesting job.
Yes, but the truth is that I want to pay a college kid to do that because I don't want to pay, I don't need to pay someone I'm going to pay them a good hourly wage and rate, but it's not going to be the same as what I would pay, someone with an expertise or a specialty.
No, really. And I get that. It's not an expertise thing. It's a sober, dispassionate observation. That's all you're looking for.
Exactly. But sometimes I read it and I say to my staff, I'm like, can you answer these questions for me? Because what it is they're streamlining the cases for me because I don't have 8 hours. I need to look at the memo and be able to say, oh, I'm looking at everything. Did, whatever my questions are, they have to be able to answer those questions. And if they can't, then they have to go back and watch the videos again to find the answers to the questions, which, but yeah. I like it. I like the interaction with the college students doing it. I think it's really interesting to watch them look at the videos and look at the police reports and see that they're not always matching up. They do sometimes. There are police that do a really good job. I'm going to say that. There are police that, are fair and they're including all the good, the bad, you know what I mean? But, I always can find cases and give examples where that's not the case.
Well,
I would
business.
say too many for the power that they have. That's what I would say. That it should be almost zero, right?
Well, but looking at just in the business world, the number of people who really dot their I's. I've worked with a bunch of different mechanics on my truck, and I'll tell you, some of them are uber professional and organized. So I can see where, and it's going to be the same sort of percentage amongst police. And my guess would be that's not a high percentage because it's not a high percentage with mechanics or podcast producers or whatever. So my guess would be that the really organized, detail-oriented, dot your I's and cross your T's type aren't doing traffic stops very long. Wouldn't that be the detective track without question? Yeah, I mean, hopefully, actually, I'm hoping that's the detective track.
Yeah, I don't know. I also think that I will also say this, is that sometimes the mistakes I don't necessarily think are done with malice or any end goal. I think some of it is so I'll give you the example. The part where my client did the field sobriety test perfectly, I can make both arguments. I could say the fact that he didn't put it in there, when I cross-examine him, he's going to look foolish and he's going to look like he was trying to hide exculpatory evidence, right? But I can also say that it could be as simple as he didn't know he needed to put it in the report because it didn't support his conclusion that my client was intoxicated. And that could be an education issue and not poor policing because they were trying to hide the ball from me.
Oh, I can see that. They don't think necessarily in that their job in that report is to provide a universe of information. Maybe they think it's to provide just the information about arrest circumstances and guilt. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing?
So that's my point. Yeah. Right. So my point is a lot of times when the reports and the videos are not consistent with each other, I don't know if it's an education issue or an end goal of, convict at all costs or something in between.
Well, maybe they just don't love to write, so they're only writing what they think they have to write about the crime committed kind of thing. Yeah, I get it. I can see that.
Yeah. And again, I'd say, like, I understand that their job is not, it's easy to critique it. It's like when I'm reviewing another attorney's trial for appeal issues. It's much easier being the, to have the hindsight afterwards, to be like, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't like. So I know that police have a hard job, and I don't think that it's nefarious most of the time. I think sometimes it might be what you say, that they're not confident about their writing, or they're not good at writing, or they don't know that they needed to include it. They're looking at only, and I've had this conversation when Mike Fedorko was on. We talked a lot about this idea of, like, police seem to be writing reports now that support a narrative that they're invested in versus having a more objective, where are the facts taking us, And maybe I'm wrong about that. That might have been my 2 cents, not Mike Fedorko's 2 cents. He talked about policing has changed dramatically during each, generation.
Well, he grew up watching fewer cop shows than cops who police today.
Oh, yeah.
He grew up with 3 channels on TV. There's more versions of CSI than that.
There is.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a whole different, you're dealing with a different species of human being in terms of what they've been exposed to if you're comparing Mike Fedorko to somebody who just put on a badge.
Correct. But shout out to Mike Fedorko.
Yeah, how about it? We get to tag him on LinkedIn now. We're talking about him behind his back. Yeah. You should get some of your old school guests back on when we weren't doing video. You got a couple fun guests that we didn't get on camera that we could bring back now that we're doing.
I should try to I think Judge Sanson would return. I'm not sure if Mike would return. Mike was like, I was pretty impressed I got him to agree to the first one. And he totally, didn't he say it on the podcast? He's like, every secret I know, it's here and it's going to die with me. He's very old school.
Man, that just makes me want to get him on a podcast.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think you're getting Mike Fedorko talking. But the idea of it is a great story in and of itself. Actually could be the beginning of a good book, right?
I find it fascinating. If you brought anybody in to talk about, anybody with his pedigree, I'll listen to all day long, is what I'm saying. I mean, he's really one of the more impressive law enforcement people I've had the honor to edit on anybody's podcast.
There you go.
Yeah, I remember the guy's resume.
Another shout out to Mike.
Yeah, how many people do you think I can spit out jobs they've had? He's maybe one of the only people from however many podcasts I've produced. He was Port Authority, right?
He's Port Authority. He was state police, head of New Jersey State Police. He was Port Authority. He was, he was detailed for the governor. He was, yeah. So,
man, he'd make a great co-host, too.
Do you think?
Oh, that perspective, an old school law enforcement perspective on, maybe that's just a true crime lover in me, but
that's probably that.
Anything to round out the conversation.
Much. Yeah. I don't know if he'd do it. He's still working. He works at the county now.
Oh, then he definitely wouldn't do it.
No. I'm lucky I got him on it.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I got him on it on season 1.
Yeah, that was good stuff. Well, let me know if you can get any of the old guard back that we can get on camera that we didn't before. Anything else we should enlighten your fans about?
No, I think that's it at this point. I think we're got a lot of good stuff, and I don't know. Do you have anything else?
Oh, not off the top of my head. I'll keep my eye out.
So what I would tell you, I think the fascination of the true crime focus point of why people really are interested and like it. And it's morbid because there's always a victim, right?
Yeah.
In true crime. there's always someone hurt. We're not investigating a type of crime where there isn't a victim, and there are crimes where there aren't actual victims. Not every crime is a murder, homicide, robbery case, but those are the crimes, those are the type of cases that people are interested. And I think it's a few reasons why. I think it is a real life puzzle of trying to figure out what happened. Okay. And then I think there's a psychology of people wanting to know why it happened. So what happened and why it happened. And I think when you do it on a podcast or a TV show, you have the ability to do that because all the information and evidence that you find is able to be utilized. That is not true in a court of law.
Oh, good point.
And in a court of law, there is not a truth that comes out. It is not like a Matlock episode. It will never be wrapped up so neatly because there is not a truth. There's not a movie that goes back and replays exactly what happens. There's a version of the truth. There's a version of the truth that might come from a victim or a witness. And there might be that the state is presenting. And there might be a version of the truth that defense is presenting. And then the jury gets to decide what version that they believe in order to determine if someone is guilty or not guilty. But that is not necessarily the truth. We're on a podcast or a TV show. You can look at everything. Everything comes in. There's no evidence that's suppressed or excluded or not heard. And you have, in some ways, a better chance of figuring it out and solving the puzzle and answering those two questions.
That's a brilliant analysis. Yeah.
And why? And you don't get that in a court of law. And that's what people don't ever understand. My clients don't understand that when I say to them, I have concerns about the trial for these reasons. And they say, I just want the truth to come out. And I say, whose truth though? Which truth is coming? And they don't like it. They really, and they think, and I'm going to finish with this. People think that when I say these things, it has to do with me being concerned about losing a trial. And I win most of my trials. I'm not concerned about losing the trial for me, though. I'm not going to jail and I'm not going to prison. Like, my job is for me to try to explain this crazy system that is not what you see on TV, that you will only experience if you're accused of a crime, of someone saying that you did something really bad. And in the end, there's not really a truth that comes out. I can't guarantee, even in the best of cases, of what happens in the jury room deliberating and what they choose to believe. I just can't control it,
That's a great way to explain it.
And then they decide the truth.
And then what you said about which truth, because you're right. The other team's walking up this courtroom steps with their truth in a bag right now. It's not just your story that's going to be presented. That's a really, you're acting on their behalf by enlightening them for sure.
I try.
All right.
I hope that when they realize that what I'm telling them, that's coming from almost 30 years of experience, that it's coming from genuine, what I tell clients, even the best cases, there's not a guarantee. And even the worst cases, there aren't. I mean, I've tried cases where I'm like, there's no way I'm winning this one. And, there's a hung jury or and so there's just, trials are difficult. But the point about the true crime podcasts or shows, it's not as much of a chess game of who knows evidence better and what gets in and what stays out. It has more of a possibility of learning what the truth is than I think in a court of law.
Yeah, it's almost more about the info than the process, where a court of law is very much about the process.
Mm-hmm. It is.